I would like to welcome you both to chat with us on the future and see what's going on now. So welcome.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Nice to be here.
Let me have you each start with, for those people that may not be familiar with your backgrounds, if you could talk just a little bit about, what your background is and what you bring to your experience here with the gaming industry in 2020. So, Jason, you want to start with that?
Sure. I do not have as rich a background in gaming as Carsten. This is my first company in gaming. I started off in financial services and then internet consumer and B2B, and eventually, partly because it was a passion of mine, started DraftKings with two other co-founders as a daily fantasy sports company. And I think most people are familiar with fantasy sports. Not everybody's familiar with daily fantasy sports. Basically a one day or one weekend version of the game. And you pick players and the players' statistics get translated into fantasy points, and then you compete in contests against other players. So much like a tournament of any sort of kind that has an entry fee and prizes. So that's where we started. And then about 2 years ago, we launched our sports betting app in New Jersey. It was our first time moving into the sports betting space. And since then, we now have sports betting online, live in 9 different states. We have retail books and a couple of others. We've also launched iGaming. We have that now in 3 states in the US. And we have expanded daily fantasy sports overseas. We're in UK and several other countries. We don't currently have sports betting or any of our other products that we offer outside of the United States. But one day we're looking forward to potentially doing that.
Great. And then Carsten, you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Whenever I have to talk about this, I feel myself pretty old. I'm 25 years in the gaming space. I programmed, I studied informatics, and in 1996, I came up with an idea to do a piece of software which is doing sports betting over the internet. And so that developed, and that developed then in being an operator. After that, it developed in getting a listing for a company. At this time, it was Bet and Win. Later on, was renamed BWin. And then I started my journey with Sportradar, where on the beginning it was more a project amongst many others. But I felt this is my space. It's sport, it's gaming, it's gambling. I understand the industry, and now we are one of the main providers for the industry. The good thing is, if you provide services to something which you have been done as an operator, that's very helpful. You understand the needs of your clients, and that's I think one of the benefits for us.
And what's the easiest way to describe what Sportradar actually does?
Well, the easiest way is we are driving sports betting worldwide. So our content is used by more or less any sportsbook in the world, in any country, in any jurisdiction. We are providing live matches, we are providing models, we are providing trading services. So more or less the full service what a betting operator needs. But they can pick and choose. There are many modules in there, not to forget the video streams and all those OTT services which we have.
So you have a menu.
Yes.
Let me stick with you for a minute and just, 2020 has been a hell of a year, especially in anything related to sports, on top of just the COVID virus pandemic. So, Carsten, just from your perspective, and we're not done with it, obviously, but now that we're into it for half a year, what's your perspective on what this has meant for our industry as well as your company in particular? And I'll be asking you the same, Jason. We'll see how they match up.
Oh, that is a long, long story. But look, the best is always I give you honestly what has happened to me, and now retro perspective. That's much easier than when you are confronted with the situation. For me, there are 3 main phases. The first one was for me fear zone. Was really in the way I went home with the last plane on the 14th of March from London to Switzerland. On the border, the police guy told me, "Welcome to Switzerland, you are the last passenger." And we closed the border, we shut it down. And then I got calls from the US, "Hey, we shut down the NBA matches during the play." So during the play, they shut it down the match because of COVID and the crisis and what happens there. So we lost then in 2 days, 99% of our live matches, the fuel which we need to have to offer our products. And I call this, for me, the fear zone. So all of a sudden, you see all the markets around the world shutting down in 2 or 3 days. Really, I never saw this. And then I began to think, wow, what can you do now? I called the bankers. I said to them, how much money do I have on the private account? How can I shift that over to help the company if necessary? What is our burn rate per year? And I constructed something which I haven't done 20 years, a rolling cash flow planning, saying, okay, how can we survive? What will happen without content? We can't do a product. That took around about 2 weeks. And within this time, we did 2 very important decisions. One is protect our employees with whatever we can. And parallel to this reaction was the reaction of saying, how can we create content that we can provide a product to our clients? That's the second thinking. How can I help my clients and how can we help our clients to do their business? And without matches, you're going to need to be damn creative. We did this. I'll tell you later on what kind of products and matches we developed. But the result was we went from 20,000 matches monthly within the crisis to 70,000 matches in July. We tripled the number of live matches within the crisis without normal content. And that was the key to success for us in that period. And you can only achieve it with learning and being humble. And that is the second period, to learn, to be humble and to understand your client needs and demands. And now we are coming to the growth period where hopefully we can use that learning from the crisis to accelerate, but that's at least the intention.
Okay.
I think it was the same for Jason, that this was a real shock in that very right moment, and everybody has to take a deep breath. I guess even for Jason it was more. Because he had something parallel up and running with the public markets. I think it was a very interesting time for everybody in the industry.
That sound right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, a very similar kind of tenor. I mean, some of the individual specifics of the experience are different because, as Carsten noted, we were literally right at the sort of final stages of a process whereby we were going public through a special purpose acquisition company. And we had announced that back in December. Everything seemed to be going well. We were marching towards closing and listing in April. And then all of a sudden in mid-March, very, very much sounds like the same time when Carsten landed in Switzerland, all the sports started shutting down. And all of a sudden our stock, because it was a special purpose acquisition company, there was a stock we were merging into, it was already publicly trading, started to crater. And we all looked at each other and said, just when we thought another curveball, couldn't be thrown at us, that we thought through everything, here it is. And obviously there was also a ton of concern, first and foremost, for our employees and their safety. We immediately moved to work from home. We actually had dry run doing a work from home about a week earlier because we thought there could be a possibility of such a situation, and we kind of locked down everybody from traveling, so we didn't end up with a lot of people on the road, and everybody felt pretty well prepared. And similar to Carsten, we didn't lay anybody off. We've actually been hiring. Once we were able to close the public transaction, which thankfully we were, we had plenty of cash on the balance sheet, and then something remarkable started happening. I think for maybe the only time I can ever recall in my lifetime, the stock market started thinking a little bit beyond next quarter. And the reason that the stock market started to think about it that way, I think, is because no one could make any sense of what the upcoming quarter's results were going to be. So they just sort of threw it out the window and said, all right, which companies could be better positioned than they were, coming into this thing whenever, this ends, whatever ends means. And I think a lot of narrative started to develop around, the potential for states, which were going to be facing major budget gaps, to potentially look at legalizing online sports betting and maybe even iGaming. Maybe even other parts of the world would be doing the same because everybody was facing budget gaps in their revenues created by the economic devastation that occurred as a result of the COVID pandemic. And, I think also people, started to point towards maybe an increased acceleration of the trend of shifting from offline to online, certainly during this period where people are being more cautious about traveling, going out for nice dinners. They have more time on their hands, more discretionary entertainment income to spend. It's a percentage anyway. I know that obviously, the economic devastation can affect that too. So we started to do very well in the stock market, and it was, a very interesting thing because, there were very few sports on TV, and that was kind of nice because it removed that distraction. We had plenty of capital. We were actually more capitalized than we've ever been in the company's history. So I was able to focus the team on what's next, and we said, okay, there's 3 objectives here. First is, how do we make sure we engage our customers when there's no traditional sports on television? And we started doing everything from creating pools around, television shows, political debates, things like that, to expanding into alternative sports like Korean baseball and table tennis. We integrated with Carsten's company streaming from a number of these sports because you couldn't watch things like Bundesliga soccer easily every game anyway, or table tennis in the United States at the time. So it's very important for people who are betting. People were open because they, were bored at home looking for things to do, to trying some of these sports, but they wanted to be able to watch them. So the team quickly prioritized integrating. I never thought, we would call up Carsten's company and say, we got to get table tennis streaming up immediately. But I'm sure that conversation occurred and they helped us and we were ready to go. So that was a big push to just try to engage customers. The second thing we said is, how do we make sure, and this is actually the first thing in terms of order, all of our employees are safe, everybody's productive. So we've been doing a lot of work to understand, how are we doing? Everything from productivity metrics, like code hours checked in per engineering head, to health and wellness, mental health and wellness included metrics that we're looking at, and things that we're trying to help, gauge whether people feel like they have the right social connections, and if we could be doing more to create, an outlet for people who've been sitting in front of screens doing Zooms for months on end. And, I think at first there was very much like hey, wow, we're as productive as we ever have been. This is interesting. Maybe we don't need to be in the office, but I think as time has gone on, it's worn on people. And, being able to support people who feel like it's taken a toll on them is very important to us. And then lastly, we talked about how do we make sure that we're, as positively positioned to compete and win as possible on the other side of this thing, whatever that means. So we talked about making sure that we have plenty of capital, which we did. We talked about making sure that we were making investments in product innovation and things that we thought we could roll out in the fourth quarter, third quarter, and beyond. And really, making sure that we had things ready to go from a marketing standpoint. When sports started to come back, we had a ton of, planning time, and it's easy to get distracted and caught up in, the panic. But we remained focused and said those are the objectives, and spent a lot of time planning. And I think for that reason, we feel extremely well prepared for what I hope is a great NFL season. Fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan. But we were very lucky, I think, because, like I said, from a capital perspective, we were in better shape than we ever have been. So not only did we not have to lay anybody off, we kept hiring pretty aggressively throughout the shutdown and continue to do so. And, it's very weird because, there's a lot of devastation going on in the world, but this has actually been a very productive and exciting time for our company, and we feel very fortunate. And I'd say the other thing that we've done as a result is, with everything going on, we've really tried to amp up our focus on giving back. We've donated millions of dollars to things like COVID relief, racial and social justice causes. We announced that we were the first games that came back from the NBA and WNBA. We donated 100% of the revenue we made from our fantasy product to causes related to social and racial justice. And, it's really been, I think, a great rallying cry for the team to say we've had a nice, very fortunate and lucky last several months in terms of the business, thriving and being able to continue to grow during such a tough time for the world. Really, we should use some of that good fortune and give back. And that's become a great thing that I think we've been able to do. And it's always been part of our culture, but I think it's increased even more so now.
Anything
there resonate, Carsten?
Many things. So, look, I think our development here is very similar. You need to get very, very close to the people. And you need, in that time when everybody is working remotely, and we did this within a week, we created 2,500 remote working places. That's an enormous stress on engineering teams, but it's also an enormous stress for all employees, because all of a sudden you're sitting at home, you're having your kids, you somehow need to find a corner, you need to do your job. The requests and demands on the job are even higher. Like I told you, we tripled the number of matches, and that flows into products, creates a lot of pressure. And people are sitting on a remote place, so the social element is not there. We did a lot of service. Our HR department did a great job here. We got a lot of requests to do tiny little tweaks, to install all these chats, these functionalities, that the people feel we're taking care of this. That create this environment and to keep that company spirit was very, very important. Yes, we tried our best to care about the people. It's a bit more difficult than it is in Jason's case. We have 30 offices around the world. So we have offices in the Philippines or in South Africa, to mention two, where the governments have no program at all to support the employees. So you can put them on short-term work, but they get not a support from the government. What we said as a solidarity in the team is that we're going to take care about those guys in the same way like we take care about the employees in the US or in Germany or in Austria. So that was a great sign of solidarity within our group. How can we balance this, that we can compensate it? So all those things is a unique challenge for every company. But I think what we did both similar, and what I hear from Jason is, you need to get very, very close to the people. You need to understand them. You need to understand their demands. And then you can create the right environment. I think that was a big learning in this. And the same goes for our clients. So understanding, how can I help Jason to do his business? Now, Jason and myself, we are big table tennis fans. But to organize it, it was necessary that we went into Ukraine. We sent our people in that time to the country to organize these tournaments and to organize 500 matches every day. We did the same in Brazil. It's FIFA 2020 World Cup. The best e-soccer players are coming from the country to get them into a tournament format. We simulated matches, the complete EPL or the complete Bundesliga, which was stopped in soccer. We simulated those matches. We created a visualization for it. And for me, that was one of the greatest learnings in that period. If I'm looking to I'm an engineer and I love programming. I love to understand how can you modify things. I'm very curious to do new things. And what I saw there is I put a team of 500 engineers on the task of saying, you're going to simulate me every sport, every match, and we're going to play that and we're going to visualize it and we give it to our clients. We did this within 2 weeks. Normally, those things are taking us a year or more with Q&A and all those things. We created that simulation sport by sport. And on the first weekend when we started it, we got 250 clients for this. And they placed 1 million bets on the weekend. That shows you it is a time of innovation and you're going to need to listen to your clients and you need to listen to your employees. That was the learning from the crisis for us.
Well, it sounds like both of you have done something that I've heard other people, other companies in our business do, is one is that you took the time for planning and you took the time for innovation because, you have to keep looking forward. So it's good to hear that you both feel like you've been able to make some strides in that regard. there's been news this week, particularly with DraftKings. You now have a common board member, I believe. So I don't know if either of you might want to talk about that.
Well, first of all, very excited to have Michael Jordan as a special advisor to our board. I did probably, steal the concept a little from Carsten, who did it first, and I'm, sure he's gotten a ton of. I'll let him talk to it, but a ton of value out of Michael. But we just announced it, so we're very excited to be working with him on, business strategy. And really, a number of different issues around product innovation, including things like diversity and inclusion, which I know Michael is very passionate about and has played a key role in bridging some of the conversations between NBA ownership and players. So Carsten probably knows a lot more than I do about what it's like to work with him, but very excited to have him as part of our team.
Look, he's a legend, but for me, he's a very special person because he's down to earth and he's very normal. He's very humble, and on our side, he's very interested in the young players. How can you help young players? And as you might know, we have that fraud prevention programs. We are looking to gaming addiction. We have a unit for those things, and he's very curious about to understand what we are doing in this and how to help and support this. He wants to protect young players into this beautiful game, and he is a legend. So he is somebody who, if he appears in a room, people are listening to him, and I think it's a great choice, Jason. I think the way that we are working in sport and the way to engage with people which play the main role in these various sports is the right way. You can learn a lot from them, and they can give their knowledge to us that we use it for our business purposes. But at the end, I think it's the right way to engage with people from the sport, and Michael is a great sample.
Let me start getting you kind of focused on the future, and particularly about fans, the customers. How are you all looking at, how do you continue to find new ways to engage the fans to, right now there's a lot of pent up demand. I hear people that are sports fans and are sports bettors, or both, and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting for things like that to really get back to normal. So what are you all looking at in terms of fan engagement down the road? Do you want to start with that, Carsten?
Yes. Yes. Look, I think what has changed here, if I'm looking to the industry, one of the things which have been very amazing for me to see is how quickly traditional retail operators changed into digital channels. I think we saw a great revolution in the last 5 months. Every operator tried the very best to get the fans into digital channels. That's the same what I see with sport. Every team owner or every federation or every team tried to use digital channels and services. So that's brilliant for a company like us. We are in the technology space and we help them. So I see a lot of innovation. I see a lot of interesting products and interesting ways, which people thought before it's not possible to do this. And now we are right into this. So it is something where, well, if I'm looking back in my past 20 years, I never saw such an accelerator for technology like I see it now. And now we need to, well, we only need to take the learnings which we had during the crisis to create the next level of products. But it's very obvious what it is. So this development will last for a couple of years here. So this is not a short-term thing and not short-term impact with COVID. We will see shutdowns all the time, even if we have treatments, it will happen. The thinking of the people is getting different. So same like we have our employees now in the home office, I think it would be very difficult to see the sport fans going back into the stadium like it was before, it will take a long time. So there is a huge chance for reaching them on the digital channel with new innovative products to deliver them more information. And the buzzword here is all about personalization. So you need to know what your client wants to have, what the sport fan wants to have, and you need to personalize this information. It's all about this. And it's a huge driver for innovation. So that is the best description which I can give you during the last 5 months. That's my learning here.
Okay, great. Jason, where do you see that headed in terms of the player engagement?
I think Carsten said it very well. A lot of what he says, I echo. It's really about innovation and using this as an opportunity to challenge people to try different things, because it's easy when everything is sort of going along on its normal course to just continue to do the same things day to day. And sometimes when you have something that, shocks the system, it gives you an opportunity to say, well, what else could we be doing? And, I think on that note, really almost any large shock to the economy or to the way of life that I've experienced in my life, it doesn't create new trends. What it does is accelerate trends that were already happening anyway. So when Carsten was touching on, the move to digital, I think he's right. This has greatly accelerated that. It didn't create it. There was already a trend towards digital that was happening, but it forced a lot of the stakeholders in the ecosystem to really hit the gas on it, which made it go that much faster. And I don't think that's going to slow down. Same thing on the product innovation side. We talked for years about, rolling out esports. Well, all of a sudden, when there was no traditional sports when there were no traditional sports on television and being played, we said, okay, esports, and it grew like crazy. And we started to launch more and more esports leagues, particularly on the fantasy side. And a lot of that stuck. It's now, one of our larger, sports that we offer. And it was basically nothing. I mean, almost nothing prior to the sports shutdown. We've, launched, as I mentioned earlier, pools around things like political debates and television shows. And I think Carsten alluded to this, the data that you get by trying these different things during, a period where maybe customers are more open and employees have, more of a need to try different things. The data you get on what worked, how it worked is invaluable. It's created a very clear roadmap for many years to come. And I think a lot of the things, maybe we won't even get back to, assuming, that sports, knock on wood, continue to be played traditional sports as scheduled. But, I think some of these things that we learned over the past few months about what works and what doesn't work could really shape the next generation of products. And we've always had a vision that even though, we love sports and sports betting is the core of what we do, that, there's a secular trend towards anything that has a predictive nature to it, people wanting to be able to bet on, whether it's the outcome of an election or, I had a lot of friends I knew that were betting with each other on who would be the next person to get killed off on the final season of Game of Thrones. And that was like a big thing amongst a lot of the people I knew watching that show. So, I think that there's just a desire for people to have opinions, to interact with others. It's a social activity, betting at its core, for many people, and in particular when it comes to proving you were right in your analysis and predictions. And I think that can extend way beyond sports. And we got a little bit of a taste of that during the sports shutdown for sure.
And if we start trying to get you to dust off your crystal balls and looking down the road, I'm just kind of curious where you see things going. I mean, nobody obviously can predict the end of the pandemic. If there is, as somebody mentioned, if there is going to be a specific end, I mean, we've got treatments and vaccines that hopefully will help down the road, but that takes a lot of science and time to prove. So where do you see things headed, and where do you think it, what will it portend for your particular companies? I'll go ahead and start with you, Jason, since you're up there already. So where do you see things headed?
Well, as you said, very hard to predict, even beyond COVID. If you had told me 3-4 weeks ago that the NBA season might be in jeopardy and would have nothing to do with the virus, I would have thought you were crazy, but that is exactly what happened. So it's a very unpredictable world right now. There's a lot of things that, beyond what Carsten and I do are going on that, really transcends business. And I think, a lot of where I think people will be focused naturally is on healing. A lot of the, damage, especially in the US, it's become extraordinarily political over a lot of the, virus-related things. So I think there's a lot of healing and bringing, people together that needs to happen. And I think there's going to be a new normal for at least the foreseeable future. I agree with Carsten's earlier comments. I don't think that there is a definitive end to this where it just goes away. Even if there's treatments or vaccines, it's still going to be part of life. And I think for at least a time, people are going to be very cautious. But at the same time, I think everyone realizes it's not realistic to shut down all commerce, to have no sports being played, things like that. So, we're watching the world figure out how do you get back to some semblance of normal with an adjustment in exactly how that works, and it includes everything from wearing masks to maybe not going out or traveling as much as people used to. I think that, that could be something that takes a while to bounce back. And as far as what that means for us from a business perspective, and I think, I would venture to guess very similar to Carsten's business, given, how much his business sort of rides in conjunction with ours, hopefully up, but up or down. I think that what it means for our business is, hopefully assuming there is a new normal where sports are being played and, maybe people aren't, as Carsten said, attending games in person as often, maybe they're not traveling as much. I think that could create an continued increased, I should say, trend towards people consuming products like ours and really any digital product for that matter, both from the standpoint of, being bored and maybe not going out as much, but also, I've heard estimates that hundreds of billions of dollars in entertainment spend literally, went away with reductions in vacations and going out to dinner and all the other activities that people typically spend on going to the movies. So, some of that I think will be eaten up by the economic devastation we've experienced. Certainly, there's going to be an impact there, but that's a lot of entertainment spend that just, suddenly isn't going to the things that it used to be. And I think that between, people staying at home, hopefully sports being played, and, maybe having a little bit of extra money in their pocket, you could see increased adoption of products like ours. I also hope that you see increased adoption by states and countries around the world from a policy and legislative perspective in terms of legalizing sports betting and hopefully other forms of betting online. And the reason I think you could see that increase is there will be a big need for tax revenue. And I think as the budgets start getting looked at, there's going to be some painful cuts that have to be made, and it's also tough, to find new sources of revenue unless you're going to raise taxes on your citizens, which some places I think will have to do and will do, and even that might not be enough. There's not a whole lot of other sources of revenue, so I think places around the world and certainly states in the United States will look towards. Hey, where is it? There's an industry here that is volunteering to pay, billions of dollars of tax revenue, if just given a legal regulated framework they can operate in that's allows them to build a business and engage customers in the state. And I think you're going to see that potentially in other parts of the world too, be a very attractive option versus some of the maybe less attractive options like cutting, important programs that are supporting people or raising taxes on citizens who might be struggling right now with the economic devastation. So we'll see what happens there. But I think, overall, a lot of what we've seen already, I expect to continue, just this increased trend towards, digital consumption. And, I think things will come back slowly and may never get totally back to exactly the way they were before.
Carsten, any thoughts from your perspective?
There's a high overlap, Sue. And if I'm looking to the markets, I only can underline that there is a demand for cash, and cash will be generated by taxes for the governments. So yes, this will probably accelerate now market openings and provide opportunities. We see this already in the US. So for us, it gets a little bit easier, also for you, Jason. Still, it is a very painful process state by state, but we see the likelihood that this is accelerating much better than we saw it last year. So we see a positive trend here, and that's very much driven by cash demand in Texas. We see the same thing in countries like India. We see some early interesting signs in China. There are generally interesting markets which have been hit hard by this pandemic, like Brazil, but we see also signs here. So if I'm looking around the globe, we're pretty positive looking to sports betting and the regulatory framework, that there are a couple of markets which drive now faster into this direction, which will be very interesting to see. I think both Jason and myself, we are at the moment very, very close to the US market. This is the place to be, looking from a total addressable market size, what you can achieve at the moment. There is a lot of innovation in that space. Very, very interesting to see that 3 years ago, everybody talked about pre-match betting in Vegas. That's it. Now the whole market is live betting. Jason was the first one to start now with streaming products in the States. And it looks to me that the period where the United States is beginning now to put the speed on it, comparing it to the developments which I know from Europe, there is a big dynamic and trajectory into this. So I think we will see a lot of product innovation driven by the developments in the States and driven by that exploding market here. So that's super, super interesting. That's how I see the trends around the globe. Looking from a technology perspective, everything goes digital. It's about customized content. It's about understanding the user. In the future, the user will get the customized content, and you will and find out what is the best for the user. The system's getting better and better. So that's simply a trend of our time, and we see this with all the big tech companies. That's a key to success. We will see it in sports betting. Industry is a little bit behind here, but that will happen. Usage of streaming content and OTT, mixing data in there, putting simulations in there is a main trend. There are big opportunities in that space. Looking from a content perspective, one of the learnings for us is never rely on only content which is traditional, so traditional tennis, soccer, basketball, whatsoever. It can happen. It stops, and it can happen all the time. And we see it now with our clients. They all calculate in this way. We don't know what will happen, and we saw it with the NBA. Things are happening now which are really difficult to calculate, but you have to calculate this content will be not there. So what we call alternative or emergency content is here to stay. You only need to look what are the categories. Is it a 3-to-3 basketball? Is it a table tennis? Is it a e-soccer match? I think there are a lot of this content which came up now and which had been implemented very, very quickly by the client is here to stay. Also, the complete space of iGaming is something super, super interesting and will accelerate. These are the things which we see in the foreseeable future. I think it all points into the direction we saw now in the last 5 months is something accelerating, which was always there, but now there is a market acceptance because of all the learnings which we all had from that crisis.
Well, let me ask you, because we do need to wrap up. If you were speaking to your colleagues in the industry, if we look down the road, depending on how long this will all go on, some folks will not make it. Some companies will not make it. What would be one piece of advice or one message to your colleagues in the industry here as they evaluate their own company's position? I mean, what's the one piece of advice that you might have to them that might help give them some longevity through this? Carsten, you want to go first?
Yes, of course. So my advice is stay humble and try to learn. This is for me a perfect time to use these principles. There are a lot of opportunities, but you need to be ready to learn. You need to understand where are the trends. You need to be ready to turn the things upside down. And you need to, even if you are successful, stay humble. In that environment, we see so many things which are happening which you can't calculate, that you need to be ready to learn on a weekly basis. I think all the colleagues know already there are things which you can't change. You can't change if you are a retail operator, that you get hit hard if your facilities are closed. But you can invest a lot into the digital channels. And I see that the colleagues did this. Some will not make it, which is really sad. And there are hardworking guys behind those enterprises, and I know this. But my advice would be, stay confident. There are many opportunities. Looking from a content perspective, for sports betting, I'm not worried at all. We showed in the last 5 months that it is possible to generate this content. So the material is there to offer a product to the clients. It is only about how to use that crisis and use that learnings to optimize your business. So that would be my advice.
Okay. And Jason, you have a piece of advice for other folks in the business?
I echo a lot of what Carsten said about, staying humble. He talked earlier about focusing on your people. I'd add to that, be very honest about what you need to do if you are in a position where survival is the #1 focus area. Don't have false hope that all of a sudden, I shouldn't say false hope, but don't completely rely that things are going to get back to normal in a relatively short time frame, or that they'll ever totally get back to the way they were before. Don't count on that. If that happens, great, and that's something that will benefit everybody. But if it doesn't, don't find yourself in a position where that was your last hope. Plan, as Carsten said, for a new normal. Invest in new things. Rally your team around what's next, and get them excited about a new journey for the company. Really lean on your key people to innovate and to come up with great ideas. Not everything can come from one person or even a small group of people. It really needs to come throughout a larger group of great people. And I think those are things that great companies do. Every company faces some sorts of challenges along the way. Certainly, it is sad, and my heart goes out to those who built businesses, many of them for decades, that all of a sudden are being threatened in a very short period of time in a way that was completely not their fault, that had nothing to do with any poor business leadership or bad strategy. It's a sad thing to see, but great companies go through challenging times, and they rise, and they innovate, and they survive. And we've certainly had ours, and I think that those are the times where I felt personally like I learned the most. I felt like my team grew the most. And I felt like some of the things that we did and came up with during those times, we never would have, dreamed of if we had just been, trudging along as normal day to day. So, as hard as it might be, there are some opportunities here. And I think that great companies will figure those things out. And it really comes down to the people. So always make sure that you're focusing on your people first and foremost.
Great. Good advice from both of you. Thank you both for sharing your insights. It's been great to be able to check in to see how things are going and see where you think they're headed. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sue. Thanks, Carsten.